Hello and welcome to another edition of Back of the Grid. I'm your host Stu, and I'm joined as always by Tom.
Hello.
And by I caught you off guard a little bit there, Tom. You were like looking in the other direction. And by Chris.
Hello, welcome back.
Hello, it's good to be back. I'm excited. I'm very, very excited to talk about this one. Welcome to another episode. Don't forget to subscribe if you're new. Leave us a like or a comment if you disagree or agree with anything that we're saying. Do join the Patreon if you really like us, and join the Predictions League as well. For the people that are listening live, don't worry, we haven't already reached the end of the show. I just wanted to do it a little bit different this week so that YouTubers see that we've got a Predictions League. And we are going to go through the Predictions League results for this week right now in an abrupt change to normal service. So, Tom, you usually do this. Are you prepared? Have you got everything ready?
Of course I'm prepared. I've always got everything ready for this. Wait, what are we doing?
So let's do this. Let's quickly get the predictions done, and then we can get into the meat of the episode.
Okay, so a roundup of Austria predictions. We didn't do so well, considering how we said that things can be quite predictable, mainly because me and Chris took a punt on fastest qualifier.
Foolish.
So only 1 point each for us there with the Verstappen win. Double Verstappen paid off for you, Stu, but more importantly, listener and viewer predictions. We've got a bunch of people who all tied for first place because they all scored 4. So no perfect 5 out of 5 this week, but quite a few 4s. I'll quickly rattle some names off. So we've got Eric Mills, Nick Esmore, ABK, Sam Christie, Gareth Walker, and Davis Gorick. So congratulations to all you for your 4 out of 5 this week. In terms of the overall standings, that leaves Benjamin Claxton in first with 22 points. And then tied in second, we've got James Hunt and Effortless Lee, both with 21 points. So, yeah. That's
very well done.
All the prediction-y stuff. Do a quick mention of fantasy leagues as well. So we've got a league on Grid Rival.
Yep.
Yeah,
it's literally just my new favourite team name across any of the things we do.
There's 4 great team names here, so you'll have to say which one. So our Grid Rival winner this week was Krusty Onion with 1,119 points. Our overall standings leader is still Effortless Leader with 9,107. And in the F1 fantasy, My Heart Will Grosjean is won with 488 points. And overall, the leader is Spinquisition with 2,491. Details for all of those things are on the website at backofthegrid.com. Links to the fantasy leagues and obviously options to join the Predictions League.
Yep, and it is always worth submitting your predictions for every race because there is a prize for anyone who gets 5 out of 5. So even if you haven't entered so far this season, still every single individual race is treated as its own sort of mini championship. If you do get that jackpot 5 out of 5, you will get a prize. Right, let's get into the episode. We've got a lot to talk about this week. We've got some tracks limits. We got the obvious usual race results, race shenanigans throughout the entire thing. So let's get into it. Track limits, Chris.
Track limits, that's what we've got to talk about. We'll just dive straight in. So, okay, let's just do the facts of it first. Then there's so much to talk about here. So we had 7 drivers penalised for track limit violations during the race, but Aston Martin then protested the results after the race, claiming that there were multiple other violations, to which the stewards basically said, yeah, we will, for the official thing, we will sign the thing that says we accept your protest, but we're already looking at it. All in all, They said there were over 1,200 possible breaches of track limits throughout the race to be investigated.
What?
They understandably couldn't keep up with, which explains why there were so many. Well, there were so many given during the race 5, 10, 15 laps after they happened. And it also goes some way to explain why there were 12 post-race time penalties applied, given to 8 drivers. Hamilton, Sainz, Gasly, Albon and Sargent all had 10 seconds added to their race time. De Vries had 15 seconds added, and Ocon had a record 4 penalties totaling 30 seconds of added time to his race.
You know what's crazy about that figure, if they're saying that that's right, 1,200 that they were investigating? over the course of 71 laps, that's like 17 per lap, which basically means that pretty much everyone crossed the line every single lap, or came close enough for them to want to investigate it.
There were only 2 drivers that didn't have a single lap deleted across the whole Grand Prix.
Who are they?
It was George Russell and Zhou Guanyu, because Zhou Guanyu posted a thing on Instagram saying he's delighted with his P2 today if you count who completed the most actual official racing laps.
That's good.
If you remove the deleted laps, it's George Russell's second win and Zhou's first podium. And all of that was only after the stewards basically made up a new rule on the fly. So the official rules around this are 3 infringements, you get a black and white flag. The 4th one, you get a 5-second penalty. And the 5th one, you get a 10-second. And then a 10-second every infringement after that. The stewards this time basically said, there are so many, we are basically having a reset at the point you get 5. And then they'll start counting up the infringements again. So for someone to have, they basically said because there's so many, they added in a reset to stop it getting ridiculous.
That's exactly the rules of the rules. The rules of the rules.
Well, you can't just make up a new rule to stop it getting ridiculous. If it gets ridiculous because of your rules, it gets ridiculous because there's the rules, right? Like, surely.
Yeah.
And then the stewards signed off by saying that they strongly suggest a better solution is needed at this track, which, I mean, I couldn't agree with more. I mean, where do we begin?
It's the Oprah gif, isn't it? You get a penalty. You get a penalty. You get a penalty.
It really is. I mean, it made F1 just look a bit silly, didn't it? It was like the bad old days of Formula E, where you'd watch a race, then you'd have to come back an hour later to see what the actual result was because they were dishing out so many post-race penalties. And
bizarre.
Really bizarre.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things as well, though, where what doesn't help matters, or didn't help from what I've heard pretty much most of the drivers saying, is they weren't even being told that they were being looked at for track limits until after they'd been given a penalty.
Yeah.
So they weren't even like being given the feedback wasn't working its way for them to be made aware they are pushing the limits. And like, I mean, yes, there's an argument to say they're the best drivers in the world and they should understand where the white line is. But if, as far as they're concerned, where they are is acceptable because they're not being told otherwise, they're going to keep doing that lap after lap after lap after lap.
Yeah.
Because they're not being told that what they're doing is an infringement. So there's got to be an element of responsibility with the FIA to actually feed back that instance being looked at. Because you can't expect a driver to make adjustments and stop doing that if they're not being told that they're in violation of it, or at least being looked at. Like every other circuit we go to, if someone does something that's either over that white line or very close to it, a message is relayed back, and you always get that being relayed then from the team to the driver of, we need to watch limits at turn whatever. And it felt like there was none of that this weekend. And the FIA will say, oh yeah, but there were so many going on, we couldn't keep up. And like, well, I'm sorry, but we've known for the last 5 years what this corner's like and what this circuit in particular is like. So do better. Like, if you're an international racing body, you should be able to facilitate someone to watch a corner and report back if there's people exceeding track limits there.
You could even argue that they should have seen this coming Friday or Saturday as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like, through practice, and we had 2 qualifying sessions, the amount of laps being deleted. You know, again, it's nice to sit here and say it in hindsight, but you would have hoped someone within the FIA would have kind of gone, hang on, if we're getting this many in practice and qualifying. And then again, I guess at that point, were they just trusting the drivers to not be pushing the limits as hard in the race as they did in qualifying? Which makes sense, right? That's what you'd expect. But
there's an interesting point raised by Albon. I can't remember if anybody else brought it up, but Albon was basically saying that, you know, had I known sooner, I would have definitely made, you know, more of an effort to be further away from the curbs. But also the wind during the race was not only changing direction, but also particularly a bad crosswind going through that final sector.
For everyone except Russell and Zhou, and probably Verstappen.
But here's the thing: like, you've got literally all but 2 drivers that have had at least an infringement. So there's got to be something to it. But like his point was that it wasn't. The point, regardless of that, like, the thing is that his main point was I wasn't being told. Like, yes, there's elements of the circuit at play, like the crosswinds. That might be an explanation for why there was just so much of it. But honestly, if you don't tell them, they can't be held responsible, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I think the crosswind argument is a bit weak. I think it's the same for everyone. And I suppose if it is the same for everyone, everyone's making the same mistake, then maybe it does kind of validate that argument. But it does sound very much like a race driver excuse to me, that one.
I'd be interested to see if any of the others have brought it up, though, out of interest.
I wonder if there's been some sort of disagreement in the driver briefing before the race with the FIA and with the drivers, or with certain drivers, some drivers and some others, and the FIA kind of trying to prove a point and just saying, we're going to come down really hard on you. We don't care what you think. We're going to enforce this whether you like it or not.
It's possible, but then
for them to be this pedantic about it and be getting every single one, and also how have they managed to, like, they've done well to identify 1,200 breaches. Have they got a camera just like on there and they're just watching every single lap and every single driver going around? Like, how are they seeing this?
But apparently the drivers' meeting was cancelled this weekend, so there's your answer to that question, which might be part of the problem, actually, thinking about it.
Yeah.
The problem is, this is exactly the rules we were asking for a number of years. Like, every time we've talked about track limits in the years gone by, it's always been because different corners have different rules, and all we ever asked for was just make it the white line, and that's all they're doing is enforcing the rule that everybody asked for. The problem is, I think it's that there's a lot of, they're supposed to be the best drivers in the world, just keep it between the lines out there, which I think is massively oversimplifying it. Like, there's so many factors at play. I don't think that's where the problem comes from. Like, ultimately, like we've said, the biggest issue I think with all this is just how slow the process is, meaning a driver's not going to change the way he's driving until he's told he has to. And if it's already too late by the time you're told and you've already got a penalty, then I don't know how they fix that. Like,
well, they fix it. I mean, there's a number of ways they can fix it. So there's technology. They could if they've got a camera on there and they've got a sensor on there, they can tell when a car's gone all the way over, and they can just hook that sensor up to each driver. And, you know, if Formula E can detect when someone goes through a particular area of track to do the Joker lap or whatever it is, what is it?
Yeah.
The speed boost thing. Attack mode. Yeah, that's it. If they can detect where a car is to do that, then surely Formula One can detect where a car is on track on its way around the circuit, even if it's using GPS.
I remember British touring cars having sensors off track to sense people like cutting corners years ago. Like, obviously, that's again kind of maybe oversimplifying things a little bit, but like it's a possibility for sure. And I do think technology is the answer. Like, F1 is a sport about developing technology to solve problems. So surely F1 as a sport can engineer a solution to this problem.
Okay, so I think we are getting into like the sort of solution part of this now, I think. So I think I'm going to dip into the inbox, if that's okay.
Yeah, makes sense.
Go for it.
Yeah. So Callum McIntyre asks, if you were to create a physical, and I actually asked the Discord a similar question to this as well, so I'm going to lump all this in together and we'll do all this now. Yeah. Callum asks, if you were to create a physical way to control track limits, what would it be? Because I can't take more of this track limit. I can't speak. I can't take any more of this track limit rubbish, especially given the delay between the offence and the penalty. So I asked the Discord a very, very similar question to this. You know, what is the solution? The first solution I got was from Dennis, and it's just a GIF of some gravel. That's the first one. The second one is from Lance Stroll down memory lane. He says, or she said, they say sausage curbs or bring back Massey. Ocon got so many they're going to have to send him back to F2. Jose says, be as strict at every circuit and they'll get used to it, or add a barrier. Benson, 1 second penalty per infringement, or add the abrasive paint from Paul Ricard. Paul says temporary wall, like Saudi. Wesley says temporary surface technology. So that was kind of, I've got a similar idea to that as well, which we can discuss after this. And Clarence says, my track limits solution would be to put a DRS detection panel on the outside of turn 10. Any car that hits this panel because they're off track gives DRS automatically to the following car and loses any DRS they had.
I actually really like it.
It's kind of like a convoluted way, but I don't hate it.
It's like hitting a banana skin in Mario, that one.
Yeah,
pretty much. Yeah.
I mean, we're getting down towards that. I had the idea, so like those are some of the ones we got from the Discord, and you can join the Discord if you become a patron. You can join the Discord, and you can be a big part of this, and we read stuff out every week. When the World Cup was in, what was it, like South? It was in I think it was in Japan. Years and years ago, like
Japan and South Korea shared.
Japan and South Korea, didn't they? Yeah. There was a particular stadium there that had a changeable surface, and each of the stadium surfaces were basically on a big bed of concrete with a bunch of holes in it, like a network of air tunnels in it, and they were basically hovercraft, and they pumped air through it, and they could move these different surfaces into position in the stadium, depending on whether it was like an event that needed a hard surface or an event that needed a grass surface, that kind of thing. And these things are the size of a football, like a soccer pitch, a football pitch. They're huge, and they can move them relatively easily, move them into position where and whenever they need to do it for whatever particular event they've got. So I wonder if there's a way of creating like some sort of recess along like behind the curbs and having something similar to that slots into place, so that they can have like a gravel trap in there and then lift it out if they need to. They can have like a flat surface for the motorbikes. They can have a grass surface if they want to over there. You know, it's something like that to sort of solve the problem of the permanence of the circuit, because it's just not working for these racetracks at the moment. Having to only do it one way and not have a gravel trap. There's no catch-all solution.
You've got to be accommodating for everyone that uses the circuit. Yeah. Totally get that. Like, you can't just go, well, let's just make it all a gravel trap. Like the FIA that have said to the circuit, you need to put a gravel trap back in here. We're urging you to do this, but that's no good for when the bikes turn up. Like,
exactly.
It's not fair. I mean, is MotoGP FIA regulated? Probably not. I assume.
FIA
bikes. Yeah. So they're not going to care in reality who else they inconvenience, and that's not the way to go about things. But I mean, Logan Sargent mentioned something not too dissimilar to this when he was talking about it, where they said to him, like, you know, what would help, and he just said, just 2 foot of grass or something that if your outside wheels get on it by you crossing too far over, it's going to be a big disadvantage, and it's going to inherently make you more careful about that corner. Mm-hmm. And something like that is in like a removable recess or a changeable recess means exactly the same sort of thing that we're talking about. Like, how many circuits for years had like big strips of AstroTurf out there? I mean, some still do. Yeah. And that seems to work and solve its purpose, because I don't know if they take it up for other series, but it's far less of an inconvenience than sticking a gravel trap next to the circuit. But it's enough of a deterrent that 9 times out of 10, probably more, a driver's not going to push all the way across there, because there's that instantaneous loss of traction on something like grass or gravel or AstroTurf that they want to avoid at all costs in reality. So I think you need something like that round a corner like this, especially something high speed like what this is.
Because the gravel argument like really annoys me because, as you say, the FIA have said it, and a number of I think some of the team principals like suggest it as well. And it's such an F1 answer to the problem because that solution exists in the F1 bubble and ignores the fact that that racetrack has to exist for the other 51 weeks of the year, where you've got motorbikes, you've got junior series who are more likely to go off the track, and it's better if they can get back on and continue getting experience. Like track days are a huge source of income for circuits. If you stick gravel traps everywhere, you can have a red flag every few minutes and no one's going to get value for it. Like, it's such a non-starter. And like sausage curds were mentioned, they need to go away forever. Like, you've only got to look at the amount of spinal injuries over the last few years. They need to be gone. Like this idea of just having essentially kind of fancy Lego at the side of the track, like just take out the bit that's there and put in a bit that works for the series that's happens to be there, seems like a good way of doing things.
Yeah, I mean, and it literally, all it has to be is like, it doesn't even need to be as advanced as this, the Japanese football stadium route. It could be as simple as just they've all got holes in the molds of the concrete for a forklift truck to lift them up. Because you're probably they're probably going to be 2 meters long, maybe a meter wide, and they just line the edge of the curb. And you probably need 10 of them going down the length of the track, and then along the exit, along the part that people are going off on, and then it solves the problem. No one will. As long as they're like heavy
enough, secured down enough that an F1 car is not going to rip them out of the ground.
Oh yeah, they'll be bolted down.
Yeah, but again, there's lots of bits of racetracks that are essentially bolted down. Like, it's not. Yeah, it just needs something, like something better than what we've had, because F1 has just looked a bit silly this whole weekend, which is a shame because it was a really good race until we started having all of these infringements and these.
This is the crazy thing,
penalties, and
especially the first half of this, and we will get into the actual race in a moment. But the first half of the race was epic. There is, of course, like an argument to say there is a really, really, really simple solution to this, and it's we just don't police track limits in this way. Fair enough if someone cuts a corner and it's an obvious, egregious break of leaving of the circuit and gaining an advantage, that's clearly like a huge issue. But if you didn't police it, then everyone would just do it anyway, and if it's the same for everyone, they're all taking the same line, they're all going to find the fastest way around the track anyway. So
but then you've only got to go back and look at the first time IndyCar ran at COTA to see how ridiculous the other direction that can look.
Honestly, I don't have a problem with that. That I would call that probably an egregious infringement of. But then I suppose we're getting into the realms of sort of making up. I mean, not that it stops them, but because they've made a rule.
Apparently.
Here. But we are getting into the realms of the problematic world where we are sort of applying one rule in one way, and then maybe quite a different. This whole thing comes from that school of thought, I guess. Yeah. And because what I don't understand is why they're applying it so vigilantly here, when at other circuits, probably in Silverstone next week, there'll be stuff like this will happen, and they'll probably no one will bat an eyelid. No one will care. Yeah. And I'm sure things like this. I'm sure there were infringements worse than this in Spain, the race before, and it's not been brought to anyone's attention. No one's done it. The other thing I hated about it at the beginning of the race was just the tittle tattle going on among all the drivers. They're all like grassing each other up, dobbing each other in. So to me, it says there must
simultaneously partaking themselves.
Yeah, there must have been. I think part of this has come about because if there wasn't a driver briefing, this has to be a result of that, because I think maybe they've done some sort of email instead of a proper driver briefing and just said, this is how we're going to do it. And no drivers had any chance to have any input and affect, how the rules are going to be applied and confirm and understand. Because I'm surely if this came up in the driver's briefing, the drivers would all say, well, we're all going to be doing the same thing anyway. No one's going to necessarily gain an advantage because we'll all be doing it. So what difference does it make? As long as you're not running super wide. then
And that's the problem, isn't it? If you're just like, oh, it was only a couple of inches. Well, as soon as you say that's okay, then suddenly the track limit is the white line plus 2 inches. Then the next driver does 3 inches. See if they get away with that. And ultimately, you have to reach a point where you do draw a line and say, oh, now you're taking the Michael Massey. And like, there has to be a line somewhere. So why not make that line the actual physical line that's on the track? But then we're back to 1,200 infringements because it's not the easiest thing in the world to avoid it.
I think with the way it is at the moment, I think the simplest solution for them is to just stop policing it altogether and see how they go. Just see what happens. Like if you don't police it, see what happens. And as long as no one's cutting a chicane and getting away with it, then I think it'll be fine. Because everyone's just naturally going to find the fastest line through the racetrack. The Formula One drivers are the best in the world. They're all driving. I'm about to dispel my own argument here, but they're all more or less driving the same lines usually, unless it's wet, and unless it's Lando Norris, who had the widest line round turn 3.
Yeah,
no one else was using, but it was getting him amazing traction, and he did really well from it. But anyway, maybe we should now move on to the actual race.
Maybe. I mean, we always start with Max because he's always going to win. He only won by 5 seconds this week.
Winner, isn't he?
I mean, you say he only won by 5 seconds. He only won by 5 seconds because he decided to have an extra pit stop.
Yeah,
it would have been 23 seconds at least if
he had a good 20-something seconds before he took the pit stop. 100%.
Quite a bold choice to do that with that smaller margin. Like he only came out a couple of seconds ahead of Leclerc. Like.
Yeah,
that shows huge faith in his pit crew because it only takes one sticky wheel nut and you've lost the race.
Yeah, or it takes something mad from the FIA in the pit lane towards the end of the race as well. Because we weren't far off that. Did you see one of the pit crew went running over to all these metal barriers to push them out of the way so that Max had room to get into his pit box when he?
I did not see that.
It wasn't huge. Like it. I think they were like getting ready to take them out and put them into like basically setting up Parc Fermé.
Yeah.
But they were definitely. I mean, they wouldn't have gone and moved them if he didn't think they were in the way. So
yeah,
they moved about 3 or 4 barriers, just pushed them back towards the wall and thing. It's just it's another. I mean, you can't blame
shouldn't be there, should they? Well,
it shouldn't be there in the first place.
It shouldn't be there during an active race. Yeah.
So that was a little bit crazy. That might actually be my WTF of the race. That one.
But there's plenty of candidates for that.
There's other stuff. Yeah, definitely.
I think it was risky biscuits from Verstappen to do that. I think if that had gone even slightly wrong, then there's a good chance that he's losing that race. It's obviously there's confidence there, but I think it was a needless risk. I think if I'd been in charge, I would have absolutely if I'd been Christian Horner, I'd have put my foot down and said, no, stay out. I guess we're not risking this race for this home race.
The big difference as well is that the car behind is not the team. The fastest lap was currently held by the other driver within the team.
Yeah.
And it's not like it's a close title fight at this point that point significantly matters. Like, there's a whole checklist of, is it worth it because of the following? And it's like a no on all of them. The only thing that ultimately does is it just cements this is my team vibe, basically, of Verstappen over Sergio Perez. That's all that does. It just solidifies I can take the fastest lap whenever I want, and the team are going to basically let me do it. So
it's not. I don't think it's even the team at this point. It's basically the whole thing is Max Verstappen's team. Max Verstappen does what he wants. What I mean. Even when the engineers tell him not to do, even if Christian had come on the radio to tell him not to, he probably still would have come in. So
priority one is
she just pulled in and been like, "Where are my tires?"
Yeah.
But yeah, that's his 5th win and 8th podium at this track, which makes it his most successful track on the calendar. I mean, we do the think of something new to say about how good Max Verstappen is segment every week, and you quickly run out of things to say. Yep. He remains unbeatable.
He's very good, and he's in a very good car, and he is a very good driver.
He did, however, lose his leading laps streak that he's held since midway through the Miami Grand Prix. Because Ferrari led some laps. Because Ferrari were pretty good again. That's 2 races in a row now where the Ferrari has had some pretty good pace.
I think the thing that kind of stood out a little bit more than anything for me with this is the degradation was a little higher than expected, and Ferrari still stayed within that sort of window that they were in. And I think that's promising for Ferrari. That's something to kind of put a bit of a pin in and think, like, you know, we're on the right track here now, because with the degradation that we had this weekend being a little bit more excessive than thought, that's like alarm bells for Ferrari, and that's them tumbling towards the back of the point scorers in previous iterations of this car, whereas they managed to hold out and looked quite racy. To be fair, like, I mean, Sainz was a little bit unlucky to not be on the podium as well, if you ask me. Played a bit of a team game to some degree for Leclerc, and got a little bit shuffled backwards because of the slow stop when they stacked. And like, there were just a few things that didn't fall his way, and he was a little bit unlucky, I think. But overall, it's a much better showing from Ferrari than we've seen earlier in the season.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about Sainz. He was definitely the faster of the 2 drivers at Ferrari for most of the weekend.
Sainz was robbed. He's absolutely robbed by Ferrari with this.
Like, he was clearly faster than Leclerc in the opening stint, and they told him not to fight. They decided to double stack them under the virtual safety car and made a hash of it, even though he wanted to stay out. Obviously, he picked up a time penalty or 2, which was his own. Well, he wasn't his own doing, but everybody was doing that. Like I say, then he kind of played the defensive role against Perez, which he did an exceptionally good job of. That gave Leclerc second place. I think Perez would have caught him otherwise. There's a frustration with Sainz with the team that seems to be rearing its head most races these days. I think he definitely had the pace to finish second that race, and in the end, he was like 6th after the penalties.
I think
yes, he dropped down to 6th. He should have been 4th, shouldn't he? Realistically, it was a few seconds off Perez by the end, but the penalty he was one of the ones in the 10-second crew, wasn't he? He dropped back behind Alonso and Norris.
I think Ferrari
he drove so well all weekend, though.
I think Ferrari let Red Bull off the hook. I think if they'd let Perez through, if they'd let Sainz through, then this would have been a much more challenging race for Red Bull to win. I think he could have been. I think they would have had. Verstappen would have had to at least push harder than what he was. You never know. Max Verstappen might have been having to push so hard that he could have got himself some penalties if they were dishing out penalties like candy. So, Ferrari need to do better at recognizing when they're who is the faster of their 2 drivers at a particular time, and using the team to try and get themselves a win, because I think what they did to Sainz this weekend was not on. I think they absolutely screwed Sainz. Like the double stack, and Sainz, when Sainz even says not to do, he doesn't want to do it, but then forcing him to do it, and he complies with them. I mean, Sainz partly Sainz should have just stayed out. He should have just overruled and just stayed out himself. He's in the car. Yeah, like they were always going to screw him with that double stack, because Leclerc is the number 1 driver there. For some reason, Leclerc's the number 1 driver there, even though he's the most. I've said it a million times. He's super overrated. That guy. He's not. I don't think he's even good as Sainz.
It just feels like another case of like, but we're Ferrari. We don't make wrong decisions. We're Ferrari, so the drivers do what we say. And even if it is obvious to everybody in the world it's a bad decision, we'll be like, no, we did the right thing.
I mean, which driver's ahead in the World Championship? Like, any other team in the world, more or less, would have given some consideration of like who is faster and who is taking their opportunities, and like all those things in combination would come to a decision of let him go attack. And I mean, every other team out there would have basically, like, essentially allowed the overtake to happen. And as maybe a worst case, they would have said, if they can't pull a gap and they can't
Swap them back.
make distance on you, we will swap back.
Yeah.
And that's what the majority of teams would do in that scenario, is orchestrate the swap and have something in place that's like that agreement. And we were like the opposite of that. Do you know what I mean? It's, I don't know.
Especially when like they're not in a world championship fight this season.
Exactly.
Certainly not the drivers'
Yeah.
fights. Like if they were, you could understand them deciding early on to put all their eggs in one particular basket. But like at this point in time, all they're doing is maximizing points each race, and you don't even need to look at who's where in the championship. At that point in time, Sainz was very clearly the faster of the two of them. Send him down the road after Verstappen, like, yeah. Definitely feel sorry for Sainz that race.
Yeah. Agreed.
Right, let's talk about Sergio Perez. We should start by acknowledging that he has been really unwell all weekend. He was suffering the fever. Apparently, he, like, barely slept. He said that he's not even sure he's going to be like back on full form for Silverstone. So there's an element of mitigating factor there. That being said, we can't get away from the fact that this is 4 races in a row now. He's not made Q3. And again, like, for all we said about the track limits, it was all his own doing. Like, in qualifying, they were finding out about deleted laps pretty much straight away. And he's in the fastest car. He could drive that car at 95% and still easily be through.
Yeah.
And he had 3 laps and he made a hash of it 3 times. Like, I don't know if that's defensible.
It's just not good enough.
It's not.
It's as simple as that. He needs to. He's in the best car, and he's not maximum. Obviously, he's managed to get himself into a decent position this weekend from 15th on the grid. I think he was at the start.
15th up to the podium, and then he was
a bit of that
qualified second for the sprint, finished second in the sprint. But
some of that was strategy, though, wasn't it? With the 15th to the thing as well. A lot of those were made when everyone pitted when he stayed out on the hards. I think he's just not fast enough, and Red Bull. We could get into a situation where towards the end, if Perez finds himself in positions where he's not getting enough points for the team, which is not a million. I don't think that's far away. I think the next few rounds of updates with McLaren, with Mercedes and Ferrari, they're probably going to be putting that's going to be potentially 6 cars in between Verstappen and Perez. Such is the gap between them. And we all know what's happened when that's been the case in the past. You know, look at Albon, look at your Kvyats, look at your
Gasly. Happened to Gasly as well.
Gasly's. Yeah. They were gone pretty quick. And
and those of you who
get rid. Go on.
Oh, the call froze for a second. Then I think we were good again. That'll need an edit. And for those of you who remember the path that all of those drivers went on who ultimately lost their seats, you'll recognise the point we've reached now, which is where both Perez and De Vries now are getting publicly criticised by Christian Horner and Helmut Marko, respectively. And there's definitely, there's everything up until now has been the kind of publicly arm around him. He needs to work on stuff, but we're fully behind him. At the point where the public criticism starts, like, it's a very slippery slope there.
I think the decision's been made once that starts. I think you wouldn't be publicly criticising the driver that's not going to make them faster.
No. And it's pretty widely accepted now that De Vries has been given the old, you've got until the summer break to turn things around kind of message. The problem with Red Bull is, though, like, what do they do? Perez in particular, like, what? As much as I still don't think they're going to do a mid-season swap, like, who could they put in the car?
Well,
Ricciardo would be
Daniel Ricciardo.
Here's what I think could happen. Here's my sort of left field opinion on what I would even do if Perez isn't doing the business, then probably get rid of De Vries, just dispose of De Vries. He was always a bit of a wild card anyway.
Dispose of De Vries.
Sure what we were going to do with him. And then...
Poor guy.
And then just thinking of a ruthless team boss hat kind of thing. You put Perez down into the AlphaTauri just to finish off the season and get that team some points, and then you give Ricciardo a try in the Red Bull. They've wanted Ricciardo back for years. Ricciardo is very, very happy to be back there. Why not give him a whirl? What's different? They're going to win the championship anyway. You might as well put him in a position where he can build his confidence on the racetrack, and then if you're going to use him again next season, he's going to be fully fit and he's ready to go. What was your
De Vries scenario other than exterminating him?
He's gone. You put him.
Who would you put in the seat though? Sorry, did you say who you put in the seat?
Perez goes into.
So you move Perez down
that seat,
okay?
Yeah,
because then he gets some points for that team.
See, the thing that Red Bull have kind of got, I guess, brewing in the background with this is you've got Liam Lawson, who's doing Super Formula at the minute.
Yeah,
to keep
doing
fresh.
Very good in Super Formula as well.
And you've got Dennis Hauger, who is F2 at the minute. So
I think he's a little too green still, personally.
Yeah, I think Hauger's going to need a little longer, but I can imagine that Liam Lawson in particular is kind of sat in the background, almost rubbing his hands together over all this criticism of those two drivers, basically, because, I mean, you could find like Perez out at the end of the season and Lawson being the one that ultimately takes the AlphaTauri seat long term. Well, I say long term, it's a Red Bull seat, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Next season.
I think Tsunoda's doing a really, really good job this year.
Yeah.
I can't see them promoting him up yet, though. I
don't think he's ready for that.
For another year or two at best.
He'd struggle with the pressure of it, I think, at the moment.
Oh, yeah, it would be chaos. You in a Red Bull right now would be absolute chaos. I'd love it, but it would be chaos. Here's my question, though. How much do you think Red Bull are regretting cutting ties with Alex Albon at this point?
They still have him on their books, don't they?
Not anymore. Last season they did, but this season he is
not
a fully Williams driver.
Oh, is he? I didn't realise that.
Yeah.
Probably a little bit.
But I reckon he would be a great solution to a lot of their problems right now.
I don't know if he would. Like, he had his chance though, didn't he? He had his. I don't think like putting when you've booted the driver out, then it's different. I think when you look at the Ricciardo situation, Ricciardo left on his own accord.
Yeah,
and it was kind of like a sad kind of. It's not you, it's me. It's not me, it's you. Kind of situation for those guys, and no one was quite happy in that relationship, but they probably needed a bit of a break. With all the others, they've been hoofed out, they've been gone, they've been disposed of essentially.
But the thing is, they clearly still thought highly of Albon because they didn't just boot him out, like they kept him around.
Yeah, they moved him through other things, didn't they?
2 years actually. They had him around as kind of a simulator driver and working on drive developments and stuff. And then his first Williams year, they still kept ties. They clearly sort of felt more tied to him than they did with a lot of the other drivers. They did just unceremoniously boot out. And I don't know. I think Albon's a very different driver now to the Albon that lost his Red Bull seat. And I think he could do a better job than some of the other drivers that Red Bull have got.
I mean, classic Red Bull tale of putting a driver in the top team before they're ready.
Too early. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
They think that everyone's Max Verstappen. They think everyone who drives for Red Bull is Max Verstappen. Every young driver is everyone do it, and it's just not the case.
They've had two absolute gems in recent times with Sebastian Vettel being able to do what he did and Max Verstappen being able to do what he did. But they are the exception. They are not the rule. Like it's not just really because we've signed them into Red Bull as a teenager, they're gonna go on and win a world championship before they're 21. It's not. That's not the case for the majority. They are two extreme exceptions, remarkable talents, but extreme exceptions. And I think Red Bull feel like they've got this sort of magic Midas touch of we can take a fast young driver and turn them into a world champion before they hit the 20s. And unfortunately, it doesn't work like that for the vast majority.
Nope. Should we move on?
Yeah.
Lando Norris. He had big old upgrade package this weekend. And that coupled with the circuit he's just exceptionally good at led to 4th on the grid, finished 5th in the race, which then became 4th again after penalties. Great drive, stunning drive, like so quick, like dueling with various cars. The way he passed Hamilton and like put the chop on him on the entrance to the corner to be like,
audacious.
No, you are not coming back at me. Like, yeah. That's the kind of Lando Norris drive we've really missed this year because his car's been a box.
Yeah. Those two, though, Hamilton and Norris, have had some like really, really good races at this circuit in the past as well. So yeah, it was good to see. It's good to see Norris. Good to see a McLaren mixing it at the front. And this is why I was saying earlier that Perez might have a problem with 6 cars between him and him and Verstappen in the not too distant future, because those guys are all really seem to be progressing now. And if you look at the jump McLaren have made with this upgrade, obviously there's a delta between Piastri and with Norris, especially at this circuit, but still, like,
Piastri didn't have all the upgrades big this week. Just
no,
I know.
Yeah. Well, that's the point I'm making. Like the comparison between the Piastri car that didn't have the upgrades and the Norris car that did have the upgrades. You can see the huge jump, regardless of how much time there is between them, that the McLaren has made with this upgrade. And that's part 1 of a 3-part upgrade that's coming. Part 2 in Silverstone, part 3 in Hungary, in theory. And by then, both cars will have it. So you really could be staring down. I mean, I don't see Piastri beating Perez, so maybe it's a 5-car gap between Perez and Verstappen. But still, like, McLaren definitely appear to be on the right path as of this weekend. So if they can keep hooking it up and these upgrades work as they expect them to, which it looks like they might be, then they could be right in the mix with the Astons, Ferraris, Mercedes.
Yeah, it's really good for Lando as well to turn it around after the backwards event that was the sprint as well, because he'd qualified really well for both races, and the sprint itself, he kind of got bogged down, didn't he, in the damp conditions going into turn 2, I think it was, and he was just swallowed by everyone and never managed to really make it back, which was a real shame from the position he started in. So it's a good thing as well that that's gone straight out of his mind, and he's then putting this performance in the full GP to get to where he has. Like, I mean, that's obviously the ultimate sign of a professional driver, is being able to do that and get that stuff off your conscience or whatever, out your mind, and just reset and perform. But really solid drive from Lando, and I'm looking forward to Piastri getting a car that's on par, basically getting some of those upgrades and seeing where that then puts him. Because you never know, he's potentially going to be chopping at the heels of a few of those that Lando's already ahead of. So of your Ocons and George Russells and people like that are, somewhere in between where Lando appears to be and the cusp of the points. I think Piastri is going to be kind of coming at those people pretty soon.
That packed midfield.
Mm-hmm.
Piastri's due to get. Piastri's due to get that same upgrade package this weekend. I mean, McLaren tend to not be, in recent years at least, they've not been great at Silverstone, I think it's fair to say. So it'll be interesting to see how they shake out this weekend, but that's getting a bit ahead of ourselves. I was playing with a few more teams. Aston Martin ended up 5th and 9th after the penalties, but that's 2 races in a row now. They were behind the Ferraris on pace, and Norris had more pace than both of them as well. Obviously, there's upgrades coming to all the teams sort of in a higgledy-piggledy kind of fashion, but can we start worrying that we've already seen the best of Aston Martin this season? Like, do you think they've probably been overtaken, or are we too early there to say that?
I was very interested by an Alonso point where he said the Haas went really well here previously and we didn't go so good here. There's something we need to learn from that. Like, what is the specific characteristics of this circuit that make them so much more like competitive to where they usually are and us so much weaker? So it was a very interesting angle for him to take. He seemed fairly positive about it all. Like, so whether he knows something we don't is another matter altogether. But it was an interesting way of looking at it, I thought.
He probably does.
He usually does.
He's always got a plan.
Mercedes, pretty miserable weekend all in all. Both qualifying sessions, they really struggled. I think they only made, between the two of them, they only made one Q3 across both qualifying sessions. Ended up 7th and 8th in race. They said that the rear end was really poor in the high speed, so they had to take out a load of front wing, and it just meant they were sliding everywhere. I mean, we ended up with Toto on the radio, like, talking Hamilton down because he was just complaining constantly. I got just sick of hearing, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it was one of the, I think, if there's a chink in Lewis Hamilton's armour, it's that he does occasionally have races like this where it's not quite going his way. He's not happy with the car, and he just gets a right grump on with it, doesn't he? And he just
gets a bee in his bonnet.
Kind of gives up a little bit. Sometimes it doesn't happen that often, but when it does, it does kind of, it costs him time.
It's weird. It goes one of two ways for him. I think he either gets like the bit between his teeth and it gives him extra pace, or it's like this and it just causes him to, like, I don't know, fester in it and not gain anything. It's much more
often the former than the latter.
100%. It's much more often an incentive and a point-proving exercise for him. But yeah, like, probably once a season you get a race like this from him, I would say, on average, where he's just that downbeat about something to do with the car or the situation that it's his pure focus, and it's a shame, but I mean, it happens to the best of us, I guess.
I think as well, though, like, in his defense, when you've been given that penalty and you're staring at the car ahead of you doing exactly what you've done, and there's no news coming through that car's getting a penalty, that has got to be very frustrating. Have you ever been told off for doing something that you didn't do, or that you feel you didn't
or
do,
that somebody else is doing?
Yeah. At the same time, like, there's nothing you can do about it. Like, complaining about it every single lap. Like, I know the teams like to have reports of this so they can report it to race control, but, like, the team, after you've mentioned it a couple of times, like, the team knows, like, you don't have to keep asking if other drivers have got penalties yet. Like, just
I mean, that is going a bit too far. I think it is. I already said earlier that it was boring listening to the tittle tattle going on between all the drivers onto the teams. But I think, I mean, if everyone was doing it, that wasn't just Lewis. That was everyone doing that. I think you do have to, if you've had that penalty and you see someone else is doing it, you do have to go on the radio and say, he's done one, he's just done another one, he's just done it again, he's just done it again. And you just have to keep saying it until, like, eventually the FIA are going to hear it and they're going to have to look at it. But what he didn't know is that they were looking at 1,200 of those events. Literally 1,200 of that exact event across the entire field. So, very, very frustrating, I think, for him and for... look, it's frustrating for all the drivers. Like, they would have been... No one has come out of this race happy with this result and happy with the way this has been managed. I think it's outrageous the way
one man
managed,
has.
So.
Well, there's one person, like
George Russell.
Well, Max Verstappen, he doesn't care at this point.
Well, he would do if he'd infringed one more time. I mean, he's got the car that he doesn't have to push through that corner, so he doesn't need to. He was never really at that much risk, and they seemed to sort of be able to relay to him quite quickly when he was on the verge of a penalty. It sounds like a lot of drivers didn't even get, knowledge that they had so many strikes. It sounds like they were just racking up completely unbeknownst to them. So I would love to see like the full figures of, you know, which driver did what. I wonder if they've released that, if that's out, the FIA.
I think I saw someone posted on a Discord like a league table of who did what or something. But there were so damn many of them. It's like
Ridiculous.
near impossible to keep track of.
Okay, last team, we've got Haas.
Yeah, quick mention to Haas. Hulkenberg in particular, who was once again fantastic in qualifying. 8th in the race qualifying and 4th in sprint qualifying. Had a nice cameo run in second for a while in the sprint. They actually did a really good job of calling the pit stop in the sprint race. I could tell he was never going to hold on to that place, so they called a good pit stop and he got some points. But again, over Grand Prix distance, the Haas just both of them went backwards. Like, I think tyre munching is a big part of their problem, but it's the same every week, isn't it? Qualify well, finish at the back.
Yeah. They're just destroying the tyre. That's the problem.
Yeah.
It's how you see it every week.
Hulkenberg pretty consistently outperforming Magnussen, though, which is not what I would have expected pre-season.
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit a couple of weeks ago, didn't we? The fact that it's, you know, at this point, although he's not got anything more than this year as contract, as far as we're aware, I think you'd be quite daft to let him go whilst you're retaining Magnussen already.
He's doing well with his Hulk.
Yeah, if I was the Haas team, I'd be giving him another contract at least.
He's a steady hand. He's a steady hand for now,
yes.
isn't he? That's what they need.
Yeah,
exactly.
Okay, awards time. Who is your driver of the day?
I think mine is Carlos Sainz. Despite getting the penalties and despite only finishing 6th, I thought he drove fantastically that race. He was so fast, like much faster his teammate, like dicing with Red Bulls. His defensive driving against Perez was unbelievable. Some of the overtakes he pulled were top draw as well.
The dicing that they
sucks
were doing
that he only got 6th place out of that.
Yeah, that was an amazing race that those two had. I was going to say similar. It's between Sainz and Norris for me. Tom, who do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I was happy with the official one, which was Norris. So, I mean, I'm kind of glad that you two have the opinion that you do on Sainz, because I thought I was being a bit favouritist towards him, with him being one of like the drivers I support regardless of team. And I thought that's why I sort of approached that last conversation that we had about him a while ago with, I think he was unlocated at it, because I thought that venting my true opinion would just be favouritism, but it appears I'm not alone, so I'm happy about that at least. But I'd be happy giving it to either of them.
I think this season, Carlos Sainz is the better driver than Charles Leclerc. I don't care who you are.
Yeah.
You just have to
agree with that.
have to look at the championship table. He's got more points. He's done better. So you can't.
I think the only thing that makes me lean more towards Lando over Carlos on this occasion is the penalties. Like, you know, Norris doesn't have any. Sainz does. So
there is that.
It's the smudge on a good performance, isn't it?
I'm going to stick with Sainz so you can have the casting votes, Stu.
Oof, don't do that to me. Can we give it to both?
I mean, we can, but...
Is that the done thing? Have we ever done that before? I don't think we have done that.
No, I think you should make a decision.
But yeah, make a decision.
Oh, God, this is hard. He's already written Norris down in there, look.
No, I've written them both down because we keep...
I thought it was Chris. Who do I think did better? I think for entertainment factor, I'm going to go Sainz. I think I was more entertained watching Sainz dicing with Leclerc than I was watching Norris chop Hamilton, which I also did enjoy. So yeah, let's go Sainz. But it's very, very, very clear. It's like literally 51% of me wants Sainz, 49% of me wants Norris.
Let's
move of the day.
Yeah. Let's do that.
I've written 4 down and 3.5 of them are Sainz. So the Sainz love train continues. I mean, Sainz did Perez, Hamilton and Norris around the outside of turn 4 and they were all fantastic. I think the Perez one was probably the best of the bunch. But any one of those I'd be happy with.
Yeah, I'm gonna go the Sainz v Perez, just the ding dong that they had against each other, I think was the highlight of the whole race for me. It was really good fun. That's why you watch Formula One. You want to sit, and that's why we changed. That's why all the aero regulations were changed so that this could happen, and it happened. So
I can go with that. We've done that before. Give it just to like a battle rather than a specific move.
Yeah, I'm more than happy with that.
Cool, perfect.
And
the
finally,
last one.
Honestly, what the are we doing here?
Whew. Well, there's a really obvious. There's some pretty good ones on this list actually. I haven't seen this until now. You got jetpack guy crashing before the race. I saw this on Twitter this afternoon. That is so hairy,
so sketchy.
Oh my god! Like if you haven't seen this, go on Formula One's Twitter and look for it, and you'll find it. They posted.
Yeah, you'll know what we're talking about.
It's this dude. He's got a jetpack on. He's got some sort of jetpack extensions on his arms. It's kind of like an Iron Man suit, but without the metal bits. And it looks like the one on his left arm kind of gives up the ghost, and it just goes plummeting to the ground, and it scrapes.
It almost looks like he trips over something invisible in midair.
Yeah, it's so weird.
So weird.
But he was fine. He was fine. Which is why we can laugh about it.
But like the fact that you see him crash, and then the camera cuts to Piastri sat in the garage, who just kind of pulls a kind of face.
There was a classic like office look to the camera, like
really
a very
was.
Jim Halpert kind of moment with Piastri, which I enjoyed.
Yeah, very good. Then we've got only 2 drivers didn't get a lap deleted in the race. Well done to Norris and Zhou. 30 seconds of penalties for Ocon.
Yeah,
crazy.
Some people in the Discord are saying Carlos Sainz complaining about being intimidated by Perez.
Yeah, that was pretty lame.
Yeah, I mean, it was obviously just a strange choice of word that he went with in a second language, but it sounded really weird.
Yeah, I think he was trying to say that it was a bit too elbows out, wasn't he? That's
bullying
what he was
you
going
off the
down,
side
like,
of
trying
the
to,
track.
being a bit pushy, but he just chosen the wrong words there. And then 1,200 track limit infringements investigated over the course of a race, and then some after the race.
I think I want to nominate that one just because it's such a ridiculous number.
Yeah.
It's a record that will never be broken until next year.
I hope not.
Until we come back to Austria,
Yeah.
I mean, my vote is with that just because of the sheer lunacy the number suggests.
Yeah, we're unanimous. Absolutely unanimous.
Cool.
So we've already done predictions, but we do need to make some predictions for Silverstone. Before we do that, we need to do the storylines. Who would like to do the storylines this week?
I can do the storylines this week in a break from tradition.
Go on, Chris. Hit us.
So first one is the fact that McLaren and Williams are both running special liveries this weekend, which traditionally means they will both have an absolutely terrible time because, as we all know, special liveries bring a curse with them. We haven't seen the Williams one at time recording. We have seen the McLaren one. They've added lots of chrome to it, a la the kind of early 2000s era.
It's the Mercedes Vodafone era, isn't it?
Yeah. What do we think of the new livery?
It's not terrible.
It's all right.
I think the thing it reminds me of for some reason is there's like a middle era Force India that it reminds me of because it's silver and orange. There was one that was like, it was back when the Kingfisher ones when like Hulkenberg and that were there, where it was like kind of a grey silver, orange, and then maybe black with a hint of green.
On it as well.
It's basically got those kind of vibes for me. It's like I can see what they're going for, but it definitely reminds me more of those cars than it does the Vodafone McLaren Mercedes.
Yeah. I think it looks fine. I don't think if I'm going to give it a full critique, I would say it doesn't go far enough. But then I understand that there are restrictions on how far they can go anyway. So I think within the bounds of what's possible, I think they've probably done about as much as they can. I think it looks kind of cool.
I believe my reaction earlier when I first saw it was putting a different colour on an already bad livery doesn't stop it being a bad livery.
Savage. Next storyline.
Next storyline. Have Ferrari really turned a corner? Can they continue to compete for the podium at Silverstone?
I'm not 100% sure. I think they might have I think them tyre munching tendencies might be back with a vengeance in at Silverstone. But we'll see.
Silverstone does tend to do that. Lots of high speed.
Yeah.
I mean, it's tended to be a decent track for Ferrari off the top of my head in recent years, but
last year we had
if anywhere's going to show up that if they have solved the tyre problem or not, it's going to be here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think going back to something I said earlier, they surprised me that they held out like they did this weekend with the degradation that we saw. So I think I can turn that into a little bit of a kind of hopefulness for Silverstone this weekend. And I think they can at least challenge for those podiums. I don't necessarily think that they're guaranteed to be on it or anything like that, but I think they'll be in the mix for it, and they'll be in that race for a podium, I think, or at least one of them will.
Cool.
And then final storyline: is Perez going to be fit enough to compete at his best?
Hope so.
Hope so. Yeah, and his best needs to be better as well.
Yeah.
That is it. You've hit the nail on the head there.
Yeah.
We've kind of done Perez, haven't we? There's not much more to say. I think I will add another storyline. Upgrades. There are upgrades still. I do this every week, but there are upgrades coming for a number of teams at Silverstone. So we could see the gap to Red Bull close further. Not that it has closed that much over the course of the season, really. I think like there's definitely some pace being masked in that car, but still, I think they are good. Everyone's getting quicker, and Red Bull seem to have sort of. I don't see Red Bull bringing that many more developments to their car from this point on. So especially with consider the advantage they've got and the penalties they've got financially and wind tunnel wise. So I think we could see if the teams can get to grips with their updates quickly, then they ought to be sort of doing better and getting closer. At least the fight behind them will close up. At least the fight behind Red Bull will close up.
Yeah,
so that'll be exciting to see. Right, let's make some predictions. Who wants to manage
Yes, let's run through these. So, as we mentioned earlier in the show, head to backofthegrid.com if you want to get involved with this. You can register if you haven't played before, and it's always worth doing because if you get 5 out of 5 across these predictions, you do win a prize. But first, it's time for us to make ours. So, fastest in Q3. Chris, where are you going for this week?
I keep saying someone other than Verstappen. So this week I'm going to say Verstappen, which probably means it won't be him.
Nice self-fulfilling prophecy there. Stu, what about you?
Verstappen for fastest and the win for me, please. Let's not mess around here.
I mean, I'm doing the same. I'm tired of losing points because of not doing this, and if it somehow curses us to something different, then so be it. It'll be at least it'll be entertaining.
I've got to do the same, I think.
This is the most boring bit of the whole of predictions, I think, right now.
Yeah, Verstappen ruining our format.
Yeah.
Just like Hamilton used to in 2000.
Yeah, I mean, it used to be the double ham, and now it's the double ver.
Yeah.
So, right, let's jump to first DNF then. Any input from you on this one, Stu?
First DNF at this circuit will be Logan Sargent.
Okay. Chris, any movement on you for this one?
I'm thinking like turn 1 mid-pack kind of incident, so that feels like a very Gasly place to be.
Okay.
Nice.
And I'm going to go with a similar sort of thing, but I'm going to say Magnussen. Maybe getting a little bogged down by faster cars around him after an okay qualifying performance. So something similar. Number of finishes. I'll go first on this one. I've not done one first yet. I'm going to say 16 this week. Stu, how about you?
19.
Ooh, very, very bold. Chris?
Only 14 last year.
There was a big incident, though, remember?
There was.
Big incident.
Yes. 3 of them were lap 1.
Mm-hmm.
60. I'll go old 17 in the middle then.
Okay, Old Faithful. And then can you draw us a random driver, please, Chris?
Please don't be Sargent.
Oh, Sergio Perez.
Oh.
Dear.
I'm just going to go first on this one and throw something out there and say 5th. over to you two. I'll let you battle amongst yourselves between who goes first.
Third.
It's not first. So third's a good number. I'm going to say fourth.
So what we've just secured by making these predictions is a Perez pole position, a Perez win.
Hope so.
I'd be okay with that, to be honest.
I'd be fine with that. I would lose points for that happily. Right. Don't forget to submit your predictions, as we already said. Just head over to backersgrid.com and you'll be able to, if you haven't already signed up, you'll be able to sign up and submit your predictions. And there is a prize for anyone who gets 5 out of 5. Okay, let's do some inbox.
Keep me saying now. But stay out. Box. Hey, man.
First this week from Tom Murray, who says, "Hello, senors. With Mercedes and Ferrari looking like they're starting to catch up, has the window for a cheeky Aston Martin win started to close?"
Yes.
Yes.
Started to.
Yes.
It's not closed yet.
It's not closed yet. It's still open, but it is beginning to close, yes.
I agree.
Yeah, I think in terms of, you never know when something mad's going to happen and both the Red Bulls are going to get taken out in a crash or something. But in terms of actual race pace, looking down at the races left, Hungary, maybe someone could get close. I think Singapore is our best hope of an on-pace non-Red Bull win, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
But still plenty of time.
Yeah, I think Aston Martin's main problem is exactly what's kind of described in the question, that the other teams are now getting closer. So the gap that kept Aston Martin ahead of the rest and in touch with Red Bull is kind of now just keeping them in touch with Red Bull, and everybody else is almost on that pace, if not already on that pace. So I think that's where Aston will struggle to take full advantage, but we'll see.
Next one, Jay Alexander says, back in 2020, Red Bull were allegedly choosing between Perez and Hülkenberg for 2021. How different do you think Red Bull's results would have been? And do you think that anyone else should have been considered? I don't think the results would have been any different, whatever driver they got. That car is designed for Max Verstappen and only Max Verstappen. And driver number 2 is a passenger as far as the team's concerned. That is just do with it what you can. This is Max Verstappen's car.
Yeah.
I think short of them hiring Hamilton.
Yeah.
Or
Leclerc.
Alonso.
Yeah.
Vettel.
Yeah.
I think pretty much anyone else, I agree. I don't think the results would have been all that much different. If anything, I think Hülkenberg might have taken a bit longer to get up to speed, given that he'd been out of the sport, and he might not even have stuck around as long as Perez has been able to.
Yeah, I agree.
Possibly.
Next one.
Yep. Sarah says, when will Perez and Max do the Hamilton-Rosberg thing and actually take out one another?
They came close, didn't they?
Spicy in the sprint.
Yeah.
Perez said he didn't know he was there, which I struggle to buy.
Yeah, I'm not believing that for a second.
He didn't just disappear.
How long? I don't think it'll happen because they're not competitive enough. It doesn't need to happen.
Well, yeah. I mean, Perez has got to be up there with him to start off with first, hasn't he?
Yeah.
Got that problem to solve first.
It took a lot of very, very tight racing with Hamilton and Rosberg before one of them finally crossed that line and caused an incident. So, yeah, Perez would need to get much closer for a long time to get to that point, I think.
Yeah.
Just on that Rosberg-Hamilton one in Spain, when you look back at that, it turned right down a straight.
It was such a mad race, that one.
Rosberg did, yeah. And that was Verstappen's very first win, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yes. Tom was there, in fact,
I do think that's
I
kind of going to have to happen. Something like that is going to have to happen for anyone other than Verstappen to win this season, but or Verstappen needs some sort of failure, I think. It's going to...
Yeah.
I think there might be snapping at their heels by the end, but the way things are going, I think the Red Bulls just sort of suddenly have to have no pace for anyone else to get a win, because even now, he was winning by 23 seconds when he made his pit stop.
Yeah.
I think we're more likely to get a Ferrari coming together with Max than we are Checo.
Yep, that's
as
possible.
things currently stand.
Somebody else, yeah.
Next one.
Next one from Wesley. Hey man, did we see a true turn in Logan Sargent's performance yesterday? Could we see Williams consistently challenging for points for the remainder of the season? So for reference, I'm not going to look at the sprint stuff, but in qualifying, Sargent was about 0.3 off Albon, I think. And then in the race, he finished a couple of places behind him. Obviously, Austria, a much, much shorter track. So 0.3 here is bigger than 0.3 elsewhere. But it was definitely one of Sargent's better weekends. He's been much further away from Albon than this in previous races.
Yeah, I was going to make a similar point to what you did there, that I'll sort of take the time differences with a pinch of salt considering the circuit we're at. Be very interested to see what that gap's looking like a circuit like Silverstone and beyond.
Yep, and the final one, Lance Stroll down memory lane. Should Mercedes should Mercedes be alarmed that their customer teams, McLaren, Aston Martin, maybe even Williams, are catching them up on race pace? Their upgrades don't seem to be the watershed they anticipated. I don't know about that. I think if you look at where they were, where they are now, I think it is a bit of a watershed moment for them. But I think there's more to come as well. There's more to come for all those teams.
Aston Martin started off ahead of them, so if anything, they've closed. Well, at certain races recently, they've closed that gap. I would say this most recent race, that gap's maybe got slightly bigger again. McLaren have definitely looked like they've found time faster than Mercedes have in recent races.
But they had more time to find, though, as well. A lot more to find. I think.
I'd be surprised if we see Williams snapping at their heels anytime soon.
Yeah, I think Williams is pie in the sky. But I think the next. So, like, this was supposed to be the new baseline for Mercedes, and it did move them forward, I think. And I think the race in the race coming up, they've got their first upgrade of their new baseline. So this should now be adding a chunk of time, in theory, to the car, a chunk of lap time to the car. So yeah, and the same's happening. But you got to remember, everyone's upgrading at the same time. So it's about who's applying upgrades the most effectively. And they can only measure against themselves, and they can only measure against what the drivers are saying. And if the drivers are saying the car feels better and they trust it more and they can get more out of it, then the lap time will come. So yeah.
Yep.
Okay, well, that is it for this week. Thanks so much for listening. If you've got this far, especially, thank you so much to everyone in the Discord and everyone listening live to us. Once again, you can find us on Patreon. You can find us on all the social medias. So do please bung us a like, give us a follow. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube. And leave us a comment. Get in touch. As you can hear, we read out the comments, we read out the questions every week, and it is so nice to have an amazing community of people who are in constant touch with us all the time. So finally, do join the Patreon if you want to join that community. Everyone who joins Patreon gets a ticket straight into the Discord, and it's a nice place to be. So on that note, I'll say goodbye. So see you guys.
Bye everyone.